Stairs don't leave fingerprints." He said it quietly. No anger, no accusation. Just 7 words that landed in the room like a door being locked from the outside. Emily Carter stood frozen in her boss's private suite blouse, half-buttoned ribs exposed, and the bruises covering them shaped exactly like a man's hand. Dark, deliberate, practiced. She had the explanation ready. She always had it ready. Slipped on the stairs. Clumsy week. She was fine. But Dante Moretti had already turned his face away to give her privacy, and that single act of respect destroyed her rehearsed lie completely. Before we go further, subscribe to this channel, follow this story to the very end, and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. The night had already decided it was going to be difficult. Emily Carter knew it the way she always knew things quietly in her body, first before her mind caught up. There was a tension behind her sternum that had been sitting there since Tuesday, since Adrian had looked at her across the breakfast table with that particular stillness he sometimes got like water right before it boils. He had not said anything that morning. He had simply watched her pour her coffee, watched her move around the kitchen, and then said very softly, "You've been distracted lately, Emily. I hope that's not going to be a problem this weekend." She had smiled. She had said, "Of course not." She had meant it as a promise and a prayer at the same time. Now it was Friday evening, 6:43 p.m., and she was standing in the 42nd floor corridor of Valenti Tower, a building that smelled like marble and old money and something faintly floral that she had never been able to identify in 11 months of working here. The charity gala was 45 minutes away from beginning on the grand floor below. 260 donors, 3 city aldermen, 1 state senator, and a man she was going to have to stand beside and smile for and call her future husband in front of every one of them. But first, she had to find the Hargrove report. Her boss, Dante Moretti, had asked for it that morning. Not in the way other men asked for things demanding impatient checking their watch before you could finish answering. Dante had looked up from his desk, made eye contact for exactly the right amount of time, and said, "The Hargrove file, Emily, whenever you have a moment." And then he had gone back to whatever he was reading, as if her moment mattered, as if she were capable of determining the pace of her own work. She still wasn't entirely used to that. She had the report under her arm now, along with a folder of seating arrangements and the evening's donor acknowledgement cards, which she had re-alphabetized twice because the first time she had been interrupted by a phone call from Adrian, reminding her to wear the blue dress, not the green one, because the green one made her look tired. And tonight was important, and she needed to understand what tonight meant for him, for them, for their future. She wore the blue dress. She was halfway down the corridor toward Dante's private suite when she heard voices coming from the auxiliary conference room, the smaller one near the end of the hall that was mostly used for storage during event nights. She recognized one of the voices as a catering supervisor she had coordinated with earlier in the week. The other voice she didn't recognize. They were talking about a delay with the hors d'oeuvres. She kept walking. The door to Dante's suite was 12 steps ahead. She had counted the distance before, not because she was obsessive, but because small certainties helped her move through days that sometimes felt unsteady. 12 steps. She knocked, waited 3 beats the way she always did, and when there was no answer, she assumed, as she had done before on late preparation evenings, that he was downstairs conferring with Rocco Hayes about security arrangements. She opened the door and stepped inside. The suite's main room was empty. His cufflinks were on the credenza, the silver ones with the small engraved edge that she had collected from the jeweler last Thursday. She set down her folders and picked them up, intending to leave them on top of the report, where he would see them immediately. She was turning back toward the door when she realized she needed the secondary lighting to check the seating chart more closely, and she moved toward the side table lamp. And that was when she heard the small sound from behind the inner door. A breath, a sharp one. She froze. "Emily." His voice came through the inner door, low, measured, with that particular quality it had when he was containing something larger underneath. Not alarmed, not angry, simply careful in a way that meant he was paying very close attention. "I'm so sorry," she said immediately, already stepping backward. "I knocked, you weren't. I thought you were downstairs. I'll leave the report and the cufflinks on the—" "Emily." The same tone, quieter this time. "Don't move." She stopped. The inner door opened. Dante Moretti was still in his dress shirt collar open jacket over one arm. He had clearly just come from his own preparation, and he had clearly stepped through that door quickly enough that he had already turned his face away before he fully cleared the frame. He was looking at the far wall, not at her, deliberately specifically not at her. And Emily Carter, in that exact moment, understood two things simultaneously. She understood that he had already seen, and she understood with a clarity that felt almost physical that he was the first person in 8 months who had looked and then immediately chosen to protect her from the shame of being seen. She pulled the fabric of her blouse closed over her ribs. Her hands were not entirely steady. "I was going to change before the event," she said. "Someone in the catering prep there was an incident with a glass of wine. It wasn't the stain would have shown under the lighting downstairs, so I was going to— I know." He was still looking at the wall. His voice was completely even. "Take your time." "It's fine, I'm fine, it's just— Emily." He said her name the way someone sets down a fragile object, carefully, with intention. "Take your time." She buttoned her blouse. Her fingers found the buttons in the right order, even though some part of her brain had gone very quiet and very loud at the same time. She could hear the distant orchestration of the venue staff below. She could hear her own breathing. When she was done, she smoothed the fabric and said in her most professional voice, the voice she had spent years building into something that could withstand almost anything. "The Hargrove report is on the credenza along with your cufflinks. The seating arrangement for Table 7 needs your approval because Senator Whitmore's office requested a change this afternoon, and it affects— Who did it? It was not a question. It had the shape of a question, but it was not one. It landed in the room like something placed down rather than something asked. Emily went very still. "I slipped on the stairs," she said. "At home. It was— Stairs don't leave fingerprints." She had nothing after that. For a full 3 seconds, she had absolutely nothing, because no one had ever said it that plainly. No one had named it so directly, so without ceremony, that the truth of it simply stood there in the room between them with nowhere to hide. Not her mother, who had seen her wince at Christmas and accepted the explanation of a difficult week. Not her colleague Janine, who had noticed her moving carefully after the incident in February and believed her when she said she had pulled a muscle at the gym. Not Dr. Reeves, her own physician, who had noted the contusions in her chart and asked gentle questions that Emily had answered with practiced steadiness until the appointment ended. "Stairs don't leave fingerprints." Dante Moretti turned from the wall and looked at her, not at the blouse, at her face. His eyes were dark and entirely focused, and there was something in them that she did not have a word for yet, something that was not pity and was not anger, though it contained the temperature of both. It was more like a decision being made in real time, like a man who has encountered a problem and is calculating with great precision exactly what it requires. "I am not going to ask you to explain anything right now," he said. "Tonight is important for a lot of people in this building, and I understand you have obligations downstairs, but I need you to hear something clearly." She waited. "Whatever is happening," he said, "it ends. I don't know the timeline yet. I don't know all the variables, but I am telling you as someone who makes decisions for a living that it ends." He paused. "You can tell me everything later, or you can tell me nothing. That is genuinely your choice. But the outcome I just described is not optional." Emily opened her mouth, closed it. The professional script she reached for in difficult moments was simply not available. There was nothing in the repertoire for this. "His name is Adrian Blake," she said. "He's the keynote speaker tonight. He's the man you're about to give the Foundation's Philanthropist Award to." The silence that followed was very brief. Dante Moretti had the quality that genuinely powerful people sometimes had the ability to absorb information that would rattle most people and continue thinking rather than reacting. She watched him process it, watched something in his expression realign. "I see," he said. "He's also my brother's cardiologist," Emily said. "My brother Noah is 10 years old. He has a structural heart defect. He's been in and out of St. Catherine's since he was 4. Adrian controls the surgical schedule, the medication grant access, the transfer priority list. He controls who reviews Noah's file and when." Her voice was steady. She had rehearsed this explanation many times in her own head in the dark, in the early hours when she was trying to understand how she had ended up somewhere she couldn't leave. Leaving Adrian means Noah loses his treatment continuity. It's not a threat Adrian makes directly anymore. He made it once about 14 months ago very clearly, and he's never had to make it again because we both understand how the arrangement works. Dante was quiet for a moment. How long have you known you needed help getting out? Since the day after he said it. She looked directly at him. The problem was never understanding the situation. The problem was finding leverage I could use without putting Noah at greater risk. Adrian is very good at making situations look like they have only one exit. Leverage, Dante repeated, and something shifted in his expression, the faintest change at the corners of his eyes. Have you found any? For the first time that evening, Emily allowed herself something that was almost not quite, but almost the beginning of a real answer. I've been working on it for 4 months. I have partial documentation of treatment priority adjustments tied to foundation donor activity. It's not complete enough yet to be bulletproof, but it's a pattern. She paused. I was going to need someone with more investigative resources than I have to finish it. The look he gave her then was not what she expected. It was not rescue. It was not savior energy, which she had learned to distrust completely. It was something closer to recognition, like he was revising a calculation. How did you get access to those records? He asked. Carefully, she said. For a brief moment, the absolute briefest something that might have been the beginning of a different kind of conversation moved across his face. Not a smile exactly. Something quieter. The gala starts in 38 minutes, he said. I know. We'll need to continue this conversation after. I know that too. He picked up his cufflinks from the credenza, the silver ones with the engraved edge, and began fastening them, without looking down, still watching her with that same quality of focused attention that she had spent 11 months trying to understand. Emily, he said. Yes. You walked into this building 11 months ago with a very specific kind of stillness, the kind people develop when they've learned to make themselves difficult to read. He finished the second cufflink. I noticed it on the third day. I didn't say anything because it wasn't my place. He paused. I should have said something sooner. Emily held his gaze. You couldn't have known. No, he agreed. But I knew something, and I chose to wait for a clearer picture. He reached for his jacket. That was a mistake I don't intend to repeat. She gathered her folders, the seating chart, the donor cards, the report that suddenly felt very small relative to everything else in the room. She moved toward the door and then stopped. The blue dress? She said, not turning around. He told me to wear the blue one tonight. He chose it 3 days ago. She paused. I just thought you should know the kind of detail you're dealing with. She heard him go completely still behind her. Understood, he said. She opened the door and walked out into the corridor, and the orchestration from the floors below rose up to meet her, and she put one foot in front of the other, the way she had learned to do, the way you learned when every day required navigation and endurance, and the constant management of a situation that had no clear exit. But something was different now. Something had shifted in a way she couldn't entirely name yet. Not safety, she wasn't naive enough to call it that. Not rescue, she had made her peace with the idea that no one was coming on a white horse. Something smaller and more durable than either of those things. The particular feeling that comes when you have been carrying a weight entirely alone for a very long time, and someone finally says without drama, without making it about themselves, I see it. I see what you're carrying. She had 11 months of evidence that Dante Moretti noticed things other people missed. The car that appeared during the rainstorm in November when she had left her umbrella on her desk and hadn't said a word about needing a ride. The food that materialized on her desk on the days when she worked through lunch placed there without comment or expectation. The way he scheduled the most demanding deliverables for the mornings and left her afternoons with more breathing room than the work actually required. Small, precise adjustments. The kind a person makes when they are paying attention not to what someone says but to what they actually need. She had told herself carefully and repeatedly that these were the actions of a good employer. She had told herself this because the alternative, that someone had been watching over her quietly from a respectful distance without asking for anything in return, was something her nervous system did not quite know how to receive. She was working on it. The elevator opened and she stepped inside. In 40 minutes, Adrian Blake would walk into the grand ballroom on the 38th floor and shake hands with senators and cardiac specialists and foundation board members. He would smile for photographs with sick children and their grateful parents. He would accept an award engraved with his name on it for his commitment to pediatric cardiac care. He would put his arm around Emily in a way that looked like affection and applied pressure to the bruise beneath her sleeve with a precision that required practice. And she would stand there and smile, because she had 4 months of documentation that was not yet complete, because Noah had a follow-up appointment in 12 days, because until tonight, she had not had anyone in her corner who understood leverage. The elevator doors opened to the grand corridor, all warm lighting, and the sound of arriving guests, and Emily Carter straightened her shoulders and walked into the room where the man who was destroying her life was waiting to be celebrated. She had spent 8 months surviving. Tonight she thought for the first time, allowing herself to think it, she was going to start winning. Downstairs in the corridor outside the main ballroom, Rocco Hayes was doing what Rocco Hayes was best at, which was standing in a position that looked casual but covered 3 points of entry simultaneously and missing absolutely nothing. He was 53 years old, built like a man who had once been required to be extremely strong and had simply stayed that way out of habit, and he had been working with Dante Moretti for 19 years. In 19 years, he had seen Dante Moretti lose his temper exactly twice. He had seen him cold before. He had seen him still in the particular way that meant something was about to happen that most people would not see coming until it was already done. He had seen him strategic, patient, meticulous, occasionally frightening in the way that genuinely composed people could be frightening when you understood what the composure was resting on top of. But when Dante came down from the 42nd floor, 11 minutes before the gala was scheduled to begin, Rocco saw something he had not seen in a very long time. He saw the stillness behind the stillness, the deeper layer, the one that came before the calculating, and after the moment of understanding. The one that meant something had been confirmed rather than suspected. "Sir," Rocco said, falling into step. "The surgeon," Dante said without breaking stride, "Dr. Adrian Blake. I want his complete profile, not the public one, the real one. I want to know everything about his relationship to the Foundation's donation structure, the treatment priority lists at St. Catherine's, and anything that connects funding flows to patient care decisions." Rocco processed this in approximately 1 second. Timeline. "Start now. Have what you can by intermission." Dante paused at the ballroom entrance and turned to look at Rocco directly. "And pull Noah Carter's full medical file. He's a patient at St. Catherine's, age 10 cardiac. I want to know who has authority over his care and what it would take to transfer that authority to an independent specialist." Rocco was quiet for exactly 1 beat. "Quietly." "Tonight it's quiet," Dante said. "Whether it stays quiet depends entirely on what Dr. Blake decides to do in the next few hours." He turned and walked into the ballroom. Rocco stood in the corridor for a moment. In 19 years, he had seen Dante Moretti choose his battles very carefully and fight them with absolute precision. He had also learned over those 19 years to recognize the specific quality of a battle that Dante considered personal. This one Rocco understood was going to be the kind they talked about later. He pulled out his phone and made the first call. Inside the ballroom, the lights were golden and the guests were arriving in their finest, and somewhere near the bar, Dr. Adrian Blake was already working the room, handsome and magnetic, and precisely as perfect as a man had to be when his entire life was a performance. He did not know that the performance was already ending. He did not know that 11 floors above him in the corridor outside an auxiliary conference room, a door had opened at exactly the wrong moment, or perhaps the right one. Emily Carter took a glass of water from a passing tray and did not look for Dante across the room. She did not look for Rocco. She moved through the gathering crowd with practiced grace, smiling at the right faces, nodding at the right moments, being exactly what the evening required. And underneath her blouse, under the blue fabric Adrian had chosen 3 days ago, the bruises were still there. But for the first time in 8 months, she did not feel entirely alone with them. Adrian appeared at her side, his hand finding the small of her back. "You look beautiful," he said in the warm public voice. "Exactly right." "Thank you," she said. His fingers pressed slightly harder into her back, just enough. A reminder. A calibration. "Stay close tonight," he said. "I need you visible." "Of course," Emily said. She did not pull away. She did not change her expression. She smiled at a foundation board member who was approaching them and extended her hand and said something gracious about the evening, and Adrian said something charming in return, and the board member laughed and everything looked entirely normal. Across the room, she caught a single glimpse of Dante Moretti accepting a handshake from a senator. He was not looking at her. He was fully present in his own conversation, attentive, composed, utterly unremarkable, in the way that only very dangerous men could be unremarkable in a room full of people watching for danger in the wrong shape. She looked away. She did not need to be watched over. Not in the way Adrian watched over her, which was not care, but surveillance, not protection, but possession. But she allowed herself for one brief moment to feel the difference between being controlled and being seen. And she held on to that difference like a rope. The ballroom filled around her. The orchestra began its first arrangement. Somewhere near the staging area, the award engraved with Adrian Blake's name was sitting in its velvet presentation box, waiting to be given to a man who had learned very early on that the easiest prey was someone who had no one to call. He had miscalculated. He had done it the moment he chose a secretary whose boss opened wrong doors. The award ceremony was scheduled for 9:15. That gave Emily exactly 2 hours and 12 minutes to hold herself together in a room full of people who believed Adrian Blake was one of the finest human beings Chicago had ever produced. She had been doing this for 8 months. 2 hours and 12 minutes was nothing. She had survived entire weekends. Adrian worked the room the way he always did, effortlessly, surgically, reading each person within 30 seconds and giving them exactly what they needed to hear. With the older donors, he was reverent, deferential, asking about their families and their legacies. With the younger board members, he was collegial, self-deprecating, in a charming way that made them feel sophisticated for being in his company. With the senators, he was humble. With the children's ward representatives, he was visibly emotional, the kind of man who almost tears up when he talks about sick kids, which was a very specific performance that Emily had watched him rehearse in front of a bathroom mirror more than once. She knew that, she knew all of it, and it still worked on everyone else every single time, which was the part that had taken her the longest to stop blaming herself for. Emily. Adrian's hand found the back of her neck fingers curling lightly. In public, this looked like affection. "The Hendersons are here. Come say hello." She went. She smiled. She said the right things to the Hendersons, who were lovely people in their 70s, who had donated substantially to the pediatric cardiac unit every year for a decade, who loved Adrian unreservedly and called him a gift to this city, who asked Emily when the wedding was, with the warmth of people who genuinely wanted her to be happy. "We haven't set the date yet," Emily said. "We're taking our time." "Smart," Mrs. Henderson said, patting her hand. "My Gordon and I waited 2 years. Best decision we ever made." Adrian laughed in the right place and steered the conversation toward the Foundation's upcoming initiatives, and Emily stood beside him and kept her smile anchored in place and thought very clearly and very calmly about the folder on her apartment's external hard drive. 4 months of documentation. Treatment priority adjustments that correlated too precisely to be coincidental with the size and timing of specific donor contributions. Pediatric patients moved up surgical wait lists within weeks of their families making substantial gifts. Other patients, ones without financial leverage, ones like Noah, shifted sideways into conditional holds that were never formally documented as such, but were understood through administrative channels to mean their placement depends on other factors. Noah's file had been marked conditional for 14 months. Emily had found it by accident. She had been helping Adrian organize Foundation files on a Sunday afternoon in February when he was called into an emergency at the hospital. He had asked her to finish the filing and left her alone with his laptop for 4 hours. She had been efficient, as she always was, and she had been thorough, and when she had opened the wrong subfolder in the Foundation's donor management directory, she had found a correlation spreadsheet that Adrian had not intended for anyone else to see. She had copied nothing that day. She had closed the folder and finished the filing and had been sitting calmly on the couch reading a book when he returned. She had understood with the particular clarity of someone whose survival had been sharpening her perception for months that the moment to act was not that moment. She had spent the following 4 months building the case in ways that could not be traced back to her directly. She had made friends carefully and patiently with a billing administrator at St. Catherine's named Rosa, who was unhappy about certain practices she had noticed, and who, with gentle cultivation over several weeks, had begun sending Emily documents through an encrypted channel that a colleague in the hospital's IT department had set up for her, not knowing exactly what it was for. She had cross-referenced Public Foundation annual reports with donor gift timestamps and patient surgical dates, working from information that was technically publicly available, but that no one had apparently bothered to assemble into a coherent pattern before. It was almost there. She needed 3 more data points to make the pattern bulletproof. She knew exactly where those data points were, and she knew exactly what it would take to get them, and she knew that doing it alone with her current resources would take at minimum another 6 weeks. What she had not counted on was Dante Moretti opening a door at 7:14 on a Friday evening. She excused herself from the Hendersons at the first natural pause in the conversation and moved toward the drinks table, needing a moment of not being watched that wasn't possible as long as Adrian had a line of sight. She picked up a glass of sparkling water and stood with her back to a pillar and let herself breathe for exactly 30 seconds. "You're counting exits." She turned. Rocco Hayes was standing approximately 6 feet away, apparently engaged with his phone, not looking at her. His voice was low enough that she had to process whether she had imagined it. "Second nature," she said quietly to her glass. "There are 4 in this room," Rocco said, still not looking up. "Service corridor behind the stage is the cleanest if things get complicated. Exits to the main elevator bank are covered by my team. The southwest stairwell is your best option if you need to move fast without being followed." A pause. "Just information." Emily was quiet for a moment. "He told you." "He told me some. You've probably filled in more than you think." Rocco put his phone in his pocket and very naturally shifted his weight so that his body angled slightly toward her while still facing away. "I want to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me." "All right. Is there anything happening tonight specifically that I should know about, not history? Tonight." She considered him for 3 seconds. Rocco Hayes had the kind of face that had been tested by enough real things that it had stopped being able to perform feelings it didn't have. He was not curious in the way someone curious looks. He was assessing in the way someone responsible looks. "He's going to be watching me more carefully tonight than usual," she said. "Big public event, high visibility, a lot of people whose opinions matter to him. He gets precise at these things. Any deviation from expected behavior gets addressed later." "Addressed," Rocco repeated. "Yes." Rocco was quiet for a moment. "I noticed the way he touched your back when you were with the Hendersons." Emily said nothing. "I've been doing this work for a long time," Rocco said. "I know the difference between a man touching his partner and a man reminding his partner of something." He paused. "I just want you to know that I saw it, and that there are people in this room tonight who are paying attention in ways that Dr. Blake is not going to account for." She let that settle. Then she said, "I have documentation. It's not complete, but it's substantial. Treatment priority lists correlated with donor activity. 4 months of it." Rocco's stillness shifted almost imperceptibly. "Where is it?" "Encrypted drive at home, and a second copy through a channel at the hospital that I'd need to explain in more detail." "Can you get me access codes to the Foundation's donor management files tonight?" She thought about that. The Foundation kept a secondary administrative terminal in the event coordination room on the same floor. She had been given access codes 3 months ago to assist with a donor communication project. Adrian had assumed she would forget about it. She had not forgotten about it. "Yes," she said. "Then here's what I need you to do," Rocco said. "Nothing dramatic, nothing visible. You go about the evening exactly as planned. Smile, stand where he wants you to stand. Don't give him anything to react to. Can you do that?" "I've been doing that for 8 months, Emily said. Rocco looked at her, then directly for the first time in the conversation. There was something in it that was not pity and was not distance, something that recognized a specific kind of endurance without making her feel small for having needed to endure it. "I know," he said. "Tonight is the last time you have to." He moved away naturally, as if they had simply been two people standing near the same table. Emily held her glass and watched Adrian across the room pose for a photograph with 3 board members and a city alderman, his arm around a woman who ran the children's ward, his smile completely perfect and entirely designed. She thought about Noah at St. Catherine's 3 miles away, probably watching something on the tablet she had loaded with his favorite shows before she left that afternoon. She had stopped by during her lunch break, specifically to do it, and when she had kissed his forehead, he had grabbed her hand and said, "You smell nervous." "I'm not nervous," she had told him. "Yes, you are. You smell like the nervous perfume." He had squinted at her. "Is it the gala tonight? Because Dante, the rain car man, his building is nice. I looked it up." "You're not supposed to look things up on the medical ward tablet," she had said. "It was educational." Noah had said perfectly seriously. "His building is 42 floors. That's very tall. Also, the foundation he runs gives money to Heart Stuff, which is relevant to my interests." She had laughed, actually laughed, which she didn't do enough anymore. "I'll tell him you said so." "Tell him I said the building is adequate," Noah had said. "I don't want to give him a big head." She held on to that. She held on to it while the orchestra played, and the room filled, and Adrian moved through it all like a man who had never done anything wrong in his life. At 8:40, the lights shifted slightly, the subtle change that meant the evening program was approaching, and Adrian materialized at her elbow with the precision of someone who had been tracking her location the entire time. "Ready," he said in the public voice. "Ready," she said. His hand went to the back of her waist. She felt the exact pressure of his thumb against the bruise over her left rib, the one that was 7 days old and the deepest. The physical sensation traveled up through her chest and settled behind her eyes, which she kept completely still. She had learned to do this the way you learn anything, with enough repetition. They walked toward the staging area together. What she did not know as she walked was what Rocco's team had found in the preceding hour and a half. She did not know that one of Dante's financial investigators had accessed the Foundation's donor management archive through her access codes and found within 40 minutes not just the correlation pattern she had spent 4 months assembling, but a secondary layer of documentation she had not known existed. Internal communications between Adrian and Foundation chairwoman Celeste Vane that went back 3 years and outlined with a specificity that suggested neither of them had ever imagined being caught the exact mechanism through which major donors received priority placement for their family members and affiliates on the hospital's surgical schedule. She did not know that the pattern affected not 4 or 5 patients, but 26 over a 3-year period. She did not know that 3 of those patients had experienced delayed surgical interventions during that period, and that 2 of those delays had resulted in documented medical complications. She did not know that Noah's conditional hold was not the casual administrative designation she had believed it to be, but was instead a specific documented tool being used to maintain leverage over her, put in place at Adrian's direct written instruction in a message to Celeste Vane 14 months ago that said in exact words that Dante Moretti read on a tablet screen at 8:57 p.m. while standing in a service corridor, "Keep the Carter boy on conditional. As long as he stays conditional, she stays manageable." What Dante felt when he read that was something he did not examine closely because the moment was not the right one for examination. He handed the tablet back to his investigator, stood very still for approximately 5 seconds, and then said to Rocco, who was standing 2 feet away, "Pull everything, all of it. I want it ready to go on the main screens at my signal." Rocco said, "There's a problem." Dante looked at him. "Blake's team just uploaded something to the venue's internal network. It's tagged as security footage. I haven't seen it yet, but I'm told it shows Emily at the Foundation's administrative terminal tonight, accessing donor files and transferring amounts to a personal account." The silence was approximately 2 seconds. "He had it prepared in advance," Dante said. "Has to be. It's too clean to be improvised. He must have had contingency footage ready in case she made a move tonight." Rocco paused. Either he knew about her documentation and has been waiting to use this, or he set up insurance for any event night when she had access to Foundation systems. Or someone told him she accessed the terminal tonight. They looked at each other. Who had eyes on her after she gave us the codes? Dante said. My full team. She didn't know she was being watched. Not from our side, Dante said. From his. Another beat. Then Rocco said, the catering supervisor, the one who was in the auxiliary conference room when Emily came upstairs. Dante said nothing, but the quality of his silence said everything. I'll pull the catering staff records, Rocco said, already moving. Do it fast, Dante said. He's going to release the footage before the award ceremony. He's going to use it to neutralize her before she can say anything. He's done this before I can feel the architecture of it. He paused. How long until the program starts? Rocco checked. 14 minutes. Then we have 13, Dante said. Inside the ballroom, Emily stood at Adrian's side while a foundation board member delivered the opening remarks for the evening ceremony, and the room settled into the warm, anticipatory attention of an audience that believed it was about to witness something meaningful. The chandeliers were warm. The tables were beautiful. 260 people who each in their own way wanted to believe that a man could be as good as his reputation were arranging their expressions into appropriate admiration. Adrian leaned toward her ear. You've been quiet. I'm always quiet at these things, she said. Quieter than usual. His voice did not change. The warmth in it did not flicker. Is there something you'd like to tell me, Emily? She kept her eyes on the stage. No. His thumb pressed into her ribs. Good, he said pleasantly. Because tonight is going to be a very good night. Everything is in order. Everything is exactly where it should be. A pause. You understand what I mean by that? I understand, she said. The board member on stage said something about dedication and selflessness and the extraordinary gift of a physician who treated every child as if they were his own, and the room responded with warm approval. And beside Emily, Adrian smiled the smile of a man receiving exactly what he had always believed he deserved. He had no idea his insurance footage was already being pulled apart, frame by frame, by Rocco's technology team in a service corridor 40 feet away. He had no idea that the metadata on the fabricated transfer records showed a creation timestamp of 6:40 a.m. That morning, hours before the gala, hours before Emily had accessed any system, a detail that unraveled the entire fraud in one data point. He had no idea that Dante Moretti was standing at the back of that same ballroom at this exact moment, tablet in hand, watching him from across a sea of people who were about to learn something. Adrian Blake had spent 3 years making himself invulnerable by ensuring that anyone who might speak against him had something to lose. What he had not considered was the possibility of someone in the room having nothing to lose at all. Or more precisely, someone who had already decided that what was being protected was worth more than what was being risked. The board member on stage said, "And now it is my extraordinary honor." Emily felt Adrian straighten beside her, the subtle physical lift that meant his public self was fully engaged, the performance reaching its peak moment, everything he had built and sustained and protected arriving at the precise moment it had been designed for. To introduce a man who has changed the lives of hundreds of children in this city. His hand moved from her waist to her lower back, proprietary visible to the room. Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Adrian Blake. The room erupted in warm applause, the genuine kind, the kind that meant people believed it, and Adrian squeezed her waist once, a private signal, a reminder, a punctuation mark, and stepped forward into the light. Emily stood where she was in the space he had just vacated and felt the absence of his hand with a quality that was not relief, not yet, but was the beginning of something that might become relief if the next hour went the way she had spent 4 months preparing for it to go. She did not look for Dante. She did not look for Rocco. She looked at the stage. She waited. And in the service corridor outside the ballroom, a tablet screen showed 43 minutes of real foundation records. The fabricated footage with its damning 6 a.m. timestamp, 26 patient files, and one internal message that said, "Keep the Carter boy on conditional. As long as he stays conditional, she stays manageable." All of it ready. waiting for the right moment, the same way Emily had been waiting with patience and with the absolute certainty that the moment when it arrived was going to change everything. On the stage, Adrian Blake accepted the microphone with both hands and smiled into the light and said, "Thank you, from the bottom of my heart." Nobody in the room knew yet that in approximately 9 minutes that heart was going to be on display in a way he had never consented to. Nobody except Dante Moretti, who stood at the back of the room with his hands in his pockets watching, and Rocco Hayes in the corridor, who said quietly into his earpiece, "We're ready when you are." And Dante said just as quietly, "Not yet. Let him speak. Let the room trust him completely." He paused. "The fall is harder from the top." Adrian Blake was 3 minutes into his speech when the first screen changed. He did not notice it immediately. He was in the rhythm of the performance, the part where his voice dropped slightly, and he talked about the first child he had ever operated on, a 7-year-old girl named Lily, who had come in with a defect so severe that 3 other surgeons had declined the case. He told this story at every major event. Emily had heard it 9 times. Each time the details shifted almost imperceptibly: Lily's age, the severity rating, the number of surgeons who had declined, but the emotional architecture remained identical, engineered for maximum impact at the 3-minute mark. It was working as it always worked. Emily could see it on the faces closest to her. The woman at the nearest table had her hand over her heart. The man beside her was nodding slowly. 260 people were leaning slightly forward. Then the woman at the table with her hand over her heart glanced toward the large display screen mounted on the east wall, the one that had been cycling through the foundation's promotional materials all evening, and her expression changed. Not dramatically, just a small shift, the kind that happens when something doesn't match what you expected to see. Emily followed her gaze. The display screen now showed a document. Foundation letterhead, a date from 18 months ago, 2 names at the bottom. The text was large enough to read from the middle of the room. Emily recognized it. It was not one of hers. It was one of Rocco's. Adrian was still speaking. "Lily taught me that no child's life should ever be considered a lost cause." A man near the back said something to his table companion. The companion looked up at the screen, then looked at Adrian, then back at the screen. "Which is why this foundation exists and why every dollar you have contributed tonight." A board member in the front row leaned over to the woman beside him. She looked at her phone. Whatever she found there made her sit very straight. Adrian noticed the shift in the room's attention approximately 4 seconds before he understood what was causing it. Emily watched it happen in real time. The micro pause, the recalibration, the quick sweep of his eyes toward the audience. A professional instinct, the kind built over years of reading rooms. He followed the attention to the east wall screen. He read the document. Emily watched his face. She had spent 2 years studying Adrian Blake's face, learning every signal it produced, cataloging the differences between his public expressions and the ones that appeared when no one he wanted to impress was watching. She knew the face he made when he was moderately irritated, and the one he made when he was genuinely dangerous. She knew the face he made when he thought he was winning, and the one he made when the calculation had shifted. In the 3 seconds that he stood at that microphone reading the document on the screen behind the audience, she saw all of those faces in sequence, and then she saw something she had never seen before, the face he made when he understood that the walls of the room had changed without his permission. He recovered in 4 seconds. She had to give him that. 4 seconds, and the smile was back, the voice steady as he looked away from the screen and said smoothly, "I apologize, it looks like there may be a technical issue with the display system tonight." Light laughter from the audience, a release of tension. Then the east wall screen changed again. A second document, different date, different donor name, same structure. And then before anyone had fully processed that one, the west wall screen, which Emily hadn't even been watching, came on with a third. The laughter stopped. Dante Moretti stepped out from the back of the room and walked toward the stage with the unhurried quality of a man who had decided something and no longer needed to think about it. The room parted for him the way rooms parted for people whose gravity was undeniable. He did not rush. He did not look at Adrian until he was at the foot of the stage steps, and then he looked up. Adrian looked down. In that exchange, 2 seconds, maybe 3, An enormous amount of information moved between them. Emily felt it from where she was standing 15 feet away. The whole room felt it. Dante said at a normal volume that nonetheless carried clearly, "I'm going to need to address your guests for a moment, Adrian. I'd appreciate it if you'd step back." Adrian's jaw moved. His hand tightened on the microphone. "This is my moment, Moretti. Whatever you think you're doing." "I know what I'm doing," Dante said. "The question is whether you want me to do it with you standing there or not." He paused. "I'd recommend stepping back. It gives you more options later." For a moment, it was genuinely unclear which way it would go. Adrian Blake had survived on the strength of his own narrative for 3 years, and people who live inside their own narratives have a particular difficulty accepting that the audience has changed. His smile was still present technically, but it had become mechanical in a way the front tables could probably see. He stepped back from the microphone. Dante walked up the stage steps, took the microphone, and stood in the center of the stage in a tuxedo in front of 260 people who were no longer quite sure what kind of evening this was, and said, "Thank you for your patience. What I'm about to share with you is not easy, and I apologize that it's happening here in this room tonight, but I've learned recently that some things don't wait for a better moment." A board member in this front row said loudly enough to carry, "What is this? What are those documents?" "Those documents," Dante said, "are records from the Foundation's internal donor management system, cross-referenced with the surgical scheduling database at St. Catherine's Children's Hospital. They represent a pattern that covers 26 pediatric patients over a 3-year period." He paused one beat. "A pattern in which surgical priority was adjusted based not on medical urgency, but on the financial relationship between patients' families and this foundation." The room was completely silent. Then from somewhere in the middle, a voicemail senior, the voice of someone who had been on the board long enough to have authority in it, said, "That is an extraordinarily serious allegation." "I know," Dante said, "which is why I spent the last 90 minutes verifying it before coming up here." The board member stood. His name was Warren Aldous, and he had been on the Foundation's board for 11 years, and he had the look of a man who had built things and was watching something he'd built crack in front of him. "If this is true," he said carefully, "the Foundation will investigate fully and immediately, but these are allegations without—" "They're not allegations." Dante turned toward the screens. "The documents include internal communications between Dr. Blake and Foundation Chairwoman Celeste Vane. They include timestamps that correlate donor gift dates to scheduling adjustments within 2-week windows consistently across 3 years. They include a specific patient file, a 10-year-old boy at St. Catherine's, currently under a conditional care hold, and a written instruction to maintain that hold as a tool to ensure the cooperation of a family member." The silence had a different quality now. Denser. The kind that comes when people are recalibrating. Emily's hands were cold. She pressed them flat against her thighs through the fabric of the blue dress. She was aware with total clarity that she was about to become visible in a way she had spent a long time avoiding, and that the choice of whether to step into that visibility or remain behind it was happening right now in real time, and that she had approximately 30 seconds before the moment passed. She was also aware, with a different kind of clarity, that Dante had not said her name. He had described the situation precisely enough that anyone in the room who chose to understand it would understand it, but he had left the door open. He had deliberately left it open. That was the difference. Right there. That was the entire difference between what Adrian had done to her story and what Dante was doing with it. Adrian had always made himself the center. Dante had built the architecture and then stepped back and left her the door. She walked forward. She did not plan it precisely. Her body made the decision slightly before her conscious mind confirmed it, and then she was moving through the gap between tables, and people were turning to look at her, and she was aware of Adrian's presence on the stage, the way his attention snapped to her with the focus of someone who has just had a variable they thought they controlled move outside the expected parameters. She walked up the stage steps. Dante turned. He looked at her the way he had looked at her in the corridor earlier, with that quality of focused attention that did not perform itself, did not add anything or subtract anything, simply saw. He held out the microphone. She took it. She stood at the center of the stage with 260 people looking at her, and she thought for exactly 1 second of Noah saying, "You smell like the nervous perfume." Then she spoke. "My name is Emily Carter," she said. "I've been Dr. Blake's secretary at Valenti Tower for 11 months. Before that, for 2 years, I was his fiancée." She paused. "I want to be precise about something because I think precision matters tonight. I did not become Dr. Blake's fiancée because I fell in love with him. I became his fiancée because 14 months ago he told me very clearly that my brother Noah's position on the surgical priority list at St. Catherine's was connected to my continued presence in his life." The sound in the room was not quite a gasp. It was more like the sound a room makes when something that was invisible suddenly becomes visible and people are reconfiguring everything they thought they understood. From the back of the stage, Adrian said, "Emily." One word, the warning frequency she had learned to respond to automatically. Her nervous system registered it. Her body did not move. "What you're looking at on those screens," she continued, "is the mechanism. The way children's surgical dates get attached to donor gift amounts. The way families with money can buy a better position on a list that's supposed to be based only on medical urgency." She stopped, swallowed once. "Noah is 10. He has had a structural heart defect since birth. He has been on a conditional hold for 14 months. Conditional means his care is dependent on factors unrelated to his health. That means every time I tried to leave or tried to speak or tried to push back, I knew what the cost might be." She paused. "I want you to understand that this is not unique to my family. There are 25 other families in these records, 25 other situations where money changed the order of things that should never be for sale." Warren Aldous, still standing at his table, said in a voice that had gone very quiet, "How long have you had this documentation?" 4 months. I've been building it carefully because I needed it to be complete before anyone could claim it was misunderstood or isolated." She looked at him directly. "I'm telling you now because tonight I had help finishing it." Adrian moved. She heard him behind her before she saw him, the sound of someone deciding that the moment for restraint had passed. He crossed the stage in 4 steps, and his hand closed around her upper arm, and he said very quietly, right next to her ear, "You have no idea what you've just done." "I do actually," Emily said. She did not pull away. She didn't need to, because Rocco Hayes was already on the stage, and his hand was on Adrian's shoulder, and the particular quality of that grip, professional, absolute, non-negotiable, communicated everything necessary without a single word. Adrian released her arm. 2 of Dante's security team appeared at the stage steps. Adrian looked at them, then at Rocco, then at the room, and the performance finally collapsed. Not dramatically. It didn't shatter. It simply went out the way a screen goes dark. What was left was just a face, and it was a face without the machinery running behind it, and it was, Emily thought, less frightening than she had expected. Less frightening than it had been in a kitchen on a Tuesday morning when he had watched her pour her coffee with that particular stillness. It was just a man who had been caught. Then Celeste Vane stood up from table 4. Emily had not known Celeste was in the room. She should have. Celeste was on the board. Celeste attended every major event. There was no reason she wouldn't be here. But she had been so focused on Adrian that she had not tracked the rest of the board placement. And now Celeste Vane, 61 years old, chairwoman of the foundation for 7 years, a woman whose name was on 3 hospital wings and a scholarship fund, and whose face was on the foundation's annual report cover, stood up at table 4 and said in a carrying voice, "I need to speak with legal counsel before anyone takes any further action in this room." The statement was designed to do what it always did: introduce process, introduce delay. Remind everyone that there were proper channels and that what was happening right now was not one of them. What it did not account for was Dante Moretti. He took the microphone back from Emily gently, a question in his eyes to which she nodded, and he turned toward Celeste and said, "The Foundation's legal counsel has already been contacted. They're reviewing the same documents you've been looking at on those screens. I called them at 8:40 tonight." A pause. They were not pleased. Celeste sat down. Dante said to the room, "I want to be clear about what this foundation will do next. An independent review will begin before the end of this weekend. Every patient file affected by these adjustments will be reviewed by a panel of unaffiliated cardiac specialists. Any patient currently on a conditional hold will have that designation removed tonight, pending independent medical assessment." He paused. The children who came to this foundation for help are going to get it. That is what this organization was built for. That is what your donations were intended for. I apologize that we are only correcting this now." Warren Aldous, who had been standing the entire time, said, "You have my full support." He looked around the table. "And I believe I speak for several members of this board when I say that an emergency meeting will be called for tomorrow morning." From table 7, a hand went up, then another at table 12. The senator, who had been extraordinarily quiet throughout, spoke briefly to his aide and then stood and said, "My office will be in contact with the Foundation's legal team by morning." He did not elaborate. He did not need to. Adrian Blake stood at the back of the stage, flanked by 2 members of Dante's security team, and he looked at the room that had been his, that he had cultivated and shaped and controlled with such precision, and he watched it reorganize itself around the truth, the way furniture reorganizes itself after the room's central piece is removed. And then Emily's phone vibrated. She almost didn't look at it. She was on a stage in front of 260 people at a moment that had taken 4 months to build and 8 months to survive. Toward and looking at her phone was not the correct behavior, but the vibration pattern was specific. 3 short pulses, pause, 3 short pulses, which was the pattern she had set for St. Catherine's Children's Hospital. She looked. It was not a call from St. Catherine's. It was a text from an unfamiliar number, but the content told her exactly who had sent it. It said, "Transfer order submitted for Carter Noah, room 412, team dispatched." Emily read it twice. Her brain parsed it at the same speed her heart did, and both arrived at the same place simultaneously. Adrian had a failsafe. Of course he had a failsafe. A man who thought 14 steps ahead and prepared fabricated footage in advance and built a system of control, this elaborate, would absolutely have a failsafe. And the failsafe was exactly what it had always been, Noah. She looked up from her phone. She looked at Adrian still at the back of the stage, and she watched his eyes move to her phone and then to her face, and she saw in the half-second before the mask reassembled itself the confirmation. He saw that she had seen. And his expression said with total clarity, without a single word, "You moved first, so I move now." Emily said quietly to Dante, who was standing 3 feet away, "Noah." That was all she said. Dante was already reaching for his own phone. Rocco, watching from the stage steps, stepped away and spoke into his earpiece. And Emily Carter, who had stood on a stage in front of 260 people and said the truest thing she had ever said out loud, turned and walked off that stage and moved toward the ballroom exit with the focus of someone who had only one thing left to protect and would not be stopped by anything or anyone between here and it. Behind her, the ballroom erupted into sound, voices, movement, the particular chaos that follows a revelation that requires everyone to reconfigure simultaneously. Board members stood. The senator's aide made a call. Warren Aldous said something sharp to a man at his table. 2 journalists who had been covering the event as a routine social piece were already typing. Celeste Vane sat very still at table 4, looking at the screens that were still displaying 3 years of the thing she had helped build, and she looked like a woman who had just realized that protecting yourself and being safe are not the same thing. Adrian Blake stood at the back of the stage, and Rocco Hayes stood beside him. And there was nothing left to perform because the audience had already left the performance and moved into something real. And 3 miles away in room 412 at St. Catherine's Children's Hospital, a 10-year-old boy named Noah Carter was sitting up in his bed with his stuffed wolf on his lap, watching 2 people in scrubs he did not recognize come through his door with a transfer clipboard, and he was doing exactly what his sister had taught him to do when something felt wrong. He was waiting for the code. The elevator was too slow. Emily hit the lobby button and stood with her back against the wall and watched the floor numbers change and told herself to breathe, which was advice she was only partially taking. Her phone was in her hand. The text from the unfamiliar number was still on the screen. "Transfer orders submitted for Carter Noah, room 412, team dispatched." She had read it 11 times in the last 90 seconds. Each time it said the same thing. Dante was beside her in the elevator. He had not asked if she wanted company. He had simply followed the same way he had simply turned from the wall earlier that evening when she needed someone to see something without making it into a performance about themselves. Rocco was behind them on his phone, speaking in the low, rapid cadence he used when he needed things to happen faster than normal. "I need someone physically in room 412 at St. Catherine's in the next 8 minutes," Rocco was saying. "Not security, not administration. Someone Noah knows, or someone who can establish authority over the transfer team before they get him out of that bed." A pause. "Then find Nurse Morgan. Whatever she's doing, it stops. She goes to 412 now." Emily said to the elevator door. "Elise Morgan. She's been Noah's primary night nurse for 6 months. He trusts her." Rocco repeated the name into the phone without missing a beat. The elevator opened to the parking level. They moved fast. One of Dante's drivers had the car already running. Emily didn't know how, didn't ask, filed it in the category of things Rocco had arranged while she was standing on a stage saying the truest things she'd ever said out loud. She got in. The car moved. "How long has he been alone tonight?" Dante asked. "Since 4:30. I visited during lunch and then came back to the tower." She paused. "He knows I have events sometimes where I can't answer the phone immediately. He's used to waiting. He's very good at waiting." Her voice did something on the last sentence that she corrected immediately. "He's 10 years old, and he's been in and out of hospitals for 6 years, and he is very, very good at waiting, which is something no 10-year-old should be good at." Dante was quiet for a moment. "What does he look like?" The question caught her off guard. Noah, what does he look like?" She looked at him. In the moving car in the dark, with everything happening at the speed it was happening, the question landed somewhere unexpected. Nobody asked her that. People asked about his condition, his prognosis, his treatment schedule. Nobody asked what he looked like. "He looks like our dad," she said. "Dark hair, big eyes. He has this expression he makes when he thinks you've said something incorrect. He gets very still and tips his head slightly to the left, like he's giving you a chance to correct yourself before he does it for you." She paused. "He named his stuffed wolf Gerald. He says Gerald is a professional name, and the wolf deserves to be taken seriously." Dante said, "He sounds like someone worth getting to." She looked out the window. The city moved past at the speed of urgency. "He is," she said, "he is absolutely worth getting to." Her phone rang. Unknown number, but the same one as the text. Her blood went cold for exactly 1 second, and then she answered. The sound that came through was small and careful, and entirely Noah. I'm here." Her voice came out steadier than she felt. "I'm here, bud. Talk to me." "There are 2 people in my room," he said very quietly, with the measured calm of someone who has learned to be precise in situations that feel unsteady. "They have a clipboard, and they said Dr. Blake sent them to move me to a different unit tonight for monitoring. They said it was routine." "Okay." She kept her voice even. "What did you tell them?" "I said I needed to call you first." A pause. "They said I don't need to call you because you already know about it." Emily closed her eyes for 1 second. "Noah." "I know," he said. "That's why I called." She almost said "I love you" right then, just from the sheer weight of him being exactly who she had taught him to be, using exactly what she had given him in exactly the moment it mattered. But she kept her voice professional, because he needed professional right now. He needed steady. "What's the code?" she said. Noah said clearly, "blue pancakes." "That's right. And do those people know the code?" "No." "Then you already have your answer, bud. You don't go anywhere with anyone who doesn't know the code. You remember why we made that rule." "Because you said trust is not about badges," Noah said, reciting it the way a kid recites something that has been said enough times to become solid. "Trust is about shared information that only safe people have." "Exactly." She paused. "I need you to do something for me right now. I need you to tell those 2 people very politely that you are not authorizing the transfer, that you are waiting for your sister, and that any further steps will need to wait for independent medical oversight. Can you say that, A-beat? Can I say it simpler?" "How would you say it simpler?" "I'd say I'm not going anywhere. My sister is coming, and you should probably leave now." Dante, who had been listening, made a sound that was not quite a laugh, but contained the temperature of one. "Say it simpler," Emily said. "Exactly like that." She heard Noah take a breath, then slightly away from the phone, in a voice that was 10 years old and entirely serious. I'm not going anywhere. My sister is coming, and you should probably leave now." A muffled male voice said something in response. Emily could not hear the words, but she could hear the tone dismissive, professional, the tone of someone who deals with uncooperative patients by waiting them out. Noah came back to the phone. "He said Dr. Blake has authorized this transfer, and my age means I can't legally refuse without a guardian present." Emily said, "Put me on speaker." A second. "Then you're on speaker." She raised her voice slightly, not angrily, just clearly. "My name is Emily Carter. I am Noah Carter's legal guardian, and I am explicitly refusing this transfer on his behalf. I am documenting this call and the time of this call, which is 9:47 p.m. on Friday. Any transfer that proceeds without my written consent will be subject to legal review. Dr. Blake's authorization has been suspended pending an investigation currently underway by the Foundation Board and law enforcement. I will be at St. Catherine's within 12 minutes. The muffled male voice said something again. Noah said to Emily, not on speaker, "He said he needs to make a call." "Let him make his call," Emily said. "You stay on the line with me." "Okay." A pause. Yeah. "Gerald wants to know if the rain car man is with you." She looked at Dante. "He is." "Gerald says okay." Another pause. "That means I say okay too. Gerald and I have the same opinion on most things." The car was moving fast. Dante had said something to the driver that Emily hadn't caught, and the road had adjusted tighter, more direct. She could see the first signs for St. Catherine's district. Rocco said from the front seat, "Elise Morgan is in the room. She got there 2 minutes ago." Emily exhaled. On the phone, she heard a different voice, female, familiar with the particular authority of someone who has been a night shift pediatric nurse long enough that she doesn't ask twice. That was Elise Morgan. Elise said very audibly, even through the phone speaker, "Gentlemen, I need you to step back from this bed. This patient is in my unit under my direct nursing oversight, and I am formally flagging this transfer order for independent review. That means it does not proceed until the flag is cleared. If you'd like to dispute that, the charge nurse station is at the end of the hall, and they will be delighted to explain hospital policy to you." A pause. Elise again. "That was not a suggestion," Noah said in the smallest, most relieved voice. "She said it like a teacher." "Elise is better than a teacher," Emily said. "I know. She let me name her coffee mug." He paused. "I named it Gerald too." She heard movement through the phone that suggested the transfer team was doing the thing Elise had suggested. The room sounds shifted. Then Elise's voice came through directly. "Emily, I've got him. How far out are you?" 7 minutes. "We're not going anywhere. Dr. Reed has been contacted. She's reviewing his file tonight, independently." A beat. "I saw the news alert on my phone. I want you to know that I am not surprised, which means I am angry about the fact that I am not surprised." "I know," Emily said. "I'll explain everything when I get there." "You don't need to explain anything to me," Elise said. "I just need you here so this kid can breathe properly." A pause. "He's pretending he's fine, by the way." "He always pretends he's fine. He has the stuffed wolf over his face so I can't see his expression." "That means he's scared," Emily said. "That's what he does when he's scared and doesn't want anyone to know." A small, muffled, deeply indignant voice from behind a stuffed wolf. "I can hear you." "I know," Emily said. "I love you. 7 minutes." She hung up. For approximately 4 seconds, she sat in the back of the car with her phone in both hands and did not speak. The city moved past the window. Everything that had happened in the last 3 hours, the corridor, the stage, the screens, 260 faces reorganizing themselves around the truth, all of it compressed into the space of those 4 seconds, and then she let it pass and came back to the present, which was a car moving through Chicago at 9:49 p.m. toward a 10-year-old boy with a stuffed wolf over his face. "Thank you," she said. Not to anyone specifically, or to everyone specifically. Dante said, "Don't thank me yet. Blake is still in that building with Rocco's team, and he doesn't have a lawyer there, and that means the next hour is going to require some navigation." "I know," she straightened, "but Noah is safe for right now." "For right now," Dante agreed, "which is what we needed." She looked at him. In the moving dark, she allowed herself to look at him the way she had not allowed herself to look at him in 11 months of shared space and careful distance and small, precise acts of attention that she had catalogued without comment. She looked at him the way you look at someone when the emergency has shifted phase and the immediate crisis has passed, and you are suddenly aware in the new space of the person who stood beside you through it. He was looking out the window. His profile was still the same quality of stillness he carried into every room he entered. But there was something different underneath it tonight. Something that had not been there at the beginning of the evening. Something that looked, she thought, like the particular exhaustion of a man who has been containing something for a long time and has just in the last hour stopped containing it entirely. She had spent 11 months wondering what he was containing. She thought she understood it better now. She looked away before he turned. The car stopped outside St. Catherine's. They moved fast through the entrance, through the corridors Emily knew by memory. She had walked them enough times in the last 6 years that she could do it without looking at the signs, could navigate by the particular sound of each unit and the color of the lighting strips and the quality of the air as you moved from public to clinical to residential ward. 4th floor, room 412, she pushed the door open. Noah had the stuffed wolf on his lap now, not over his face, which meant he had heard the elevator and reconfigured to the version of himself that was fine. He was sitting very straight in the bed, wearing the blue hospital pajamas, with the small geometric pattern that Emily had brought from home, because he refused to wear the ones the hospital provided. And he looked at her when she came through the door with the expression she knew better than any other expression on earth, the one that was trying very hard to look like nothing had happened and was not entirely succeeding. She crossed the room and sat on the edge of the bed and put her arms around him. He made the sound that kids make when they have been holding something together for a long time and finally don't have to anymore, a breath that was the release of everything. His arms went around her waist, and he held on with the grip of someone who had been told twice in one evening that things were fine and had not entirely believed it. She held him and did not say anything because there was nothing to say that was better than just being there. After a moment, Noah said into her shoulder, "The rain car man came." She looked up. Dante was standing in the doorway, not inside the room, just at the threshold, with the particular quality of someone who has understood without being told that this is not his moment to enter. "He did," Emily said. Noah turned his head without letting go of Emily and looked at Dante with the evaluating expression, the head tilt, the stillness that she had described in the car. He looked at him for a full 4 seconds. Dante waited. "Your building is adequate," Noah said. Dante said, "I'll take that. Gerald thinks so too." Noah looked at the wolf, then back at Dante. "Gerald is a good judge." "Then I'm honored," Dante said with complete seriousness. Noah appeared to file this response under acceptable. He turned back to Emily. "Are the bad people going away?" She smoothed his hair back. "They're going away." "Is it because of the documents you've been hiding in the encrypted drive at home?" She stared at him. "You know about that." "You use the same password for everything," Noah said with the patience of someone who has long since accepted this failing. "I don't know what's on it because I didn't open it because that would have been wrong, but I know it exists." He paused. "I'm not a child, Em." "You are literally a child." "I am a child who has been in hospitals for 6 years," he said. "I know more about what goes on in here than most adults. I knew something was wrong with the schedule. I knew my hold was not medical." He paused. "I didn't say anything because you never told me, and I thought maybe you were protecting me." She looked at him. The weight of what he had just said settled across her completely. 10 years old. Structural heart defect since birth. 6 years of medical uncertainty, and 2 years of something much worse layered on top of it, and he had known, and he had been quiet about it. And he had been protecting her while she was protecting him. "I was protecting you," she said. "I know," he said. "It's okay. We can talk about it later." He looked at Dante again, then back at her. "I think the rain car man should come in. Gerald says it's okay, and Gerald has final authority on room occupancy." Dante stepped inside the room. Elise Morgan was standing near the monitoring equipment with the expression of someone who has been containing several emotions for the last 40 minutes and is doing it through professional discipline and not much else. She looked at Emily with something direct and unembellished and said, "Dr. Reed is coming tomorrow morning. Independent review. His conditional hold was removed 11 minutes ago. I watched the system update in real time." Emily said, "Who authorized the removal?" Elise said, "Foundation board member Warren Aldis signed the emergency override at 9:52. He called the hospital directly." Something moved through Emily that she did not have a word for. Relief was part of it, but it was bigger than relief. It was the feeling that accompanies the moment when something that has been constructed entirely out of someone else's control of you is dismantled piece by piece in real time by people who chose to do the right thing. She had not been certain those people existed in sufficient number. She was revising that assessment. Her phone rang. She looked at the screen. It was a number she did not recognize, but the area code was federal, and Rocco had said back at Valenti Tower that certain people would be making calls by morning. Apparently some of them were making calls now instead, she answered. The voice on the other end was professional, measured, and identified itself as belonging to the Federal Bureau of Investigation's Chicago field office. The agent said that they had received documentation from Valenti Tower's legal team in the last 40 minutes that they were initiating a preliminary review of the materials, and that they would need Emily to provide a formal statement at her earliest convenience tomorrow if possible. She said, "Tomorrow is fine." She hung up. Noah said, "Was that the FBI?" "Yes." He absorbed this. "Because of the documents." "Because of the documents." He nodded slowly. "Good," he said with the gravity of a 10-year-old who has decided something is correctly resolved. Then, "Can I have pudding? I was supposed to have. Pudding an hour ago, and then the transfer people came and Nurse Elise said we'd do it after, and I feel like after is now." Elise said, already moving toward the door, "Chocolate or vanilla?" "Chocolate," Noah said. "Obviously." Elise left. The room was quiet. Emily sat on the edge of the bed with her brother's hand in hers, and Dante Moretti stood near the window. Not intrusively, not performing anything, simply present in the specific way that meant he was there, if needed, and elsewhere if not. And for the first time since the elevator at 7:14 p.m., the pace of everything slowed to something bearable. Noah looked at their joined hands. Then he said to Emily, in a voice that was quieter than his normal voice stripped of the 10-year-old performance of being fine, "It's over, like actually over." "The hard part," she said. "Yes." "What's the easy part?" She thought about that. Getting to decide what comes next. He was quiet for a moment. "I want to go to a real school," he said. "Not online. A real one with a lunchroom and gym class and all of it. Dr. Reed said if the surgery goes well and recovery is clean, maybe by September." "Then that's what we work toward," Emily said. "And I want a dog," he said. "I've wanted a dog for 3 years, and every time I ask you say maybe, and I want a real answer." She looked at him. "Maybe." He looked at the ceiling. "That's what I thought." From near the window, Dante said very quietly, almost to himself, "For what it's worth, my building allows dogs." Noah turned his head. The evaluating expression reappeared, the head tilt, the stillness. He looked at Dante for approximately 5 seconds with the full weight of his assessment. Then he said, "Gerald is upgrading your building from adequate to good." "I'll take that too," Dante said. "And in room 412 at St. Catherine's Children's Hospital, with the city running its usual noise outside and the monitoring equipment doing its steady, reliable work, and a stuffed wolf named Gerald sitting between a 10-year-old boy and the 2 people who had just burned down everything that was hurting him, something settled. Not finished. There was still tomorrow, still the FBI, still the board, still Adrian Blake in a room somewhere with Rocco's team, and the particular problem of a man who does not accept the end of things gracefully. There was still a lot of after, but the weight that had been sitting in Emily Carter's sternum since Tuesday, the one she had identified that morning at the breakfast table and carried through the gala and the stage and the car and the corridor, was gone. Not managed, not suppressed. Gone. She breathed in, she breathed out. Elise came back with the pudding. Noah said, "Chocolate, good." He ate it with the focused satisfaction of someone who has earned it, and Emily watched him and Dante watched the city from the window, and the room held all of them gently in its ordinary quiet, which was the most extraordinary thing that had happened all evening. The phone on the bedside table lit up with a text from an unfamiliar number. Emily reached for it, automatically braced for another crisis, and read it. It was from Rocco. It said, "Adrian Blake, detained. Federal agents on site. Celeste Vane Cooperative. Files sealed. You're clear." She set the phone down. She did not say anything. She did not need to. Noah was scraping the bottom of the pudding cup with complete concentration. Dante had turned from the window and was looking at her with a question in his expression, and she held up the phone so he could read it and watched something in his face relax in a way she had never seen it relax before, a letting go so small that most people would have missed it. But she had spent 11 months learning to read him, and she did not miss it. She looked back at her brother. Outside, the city continued its business, indifferent and enormous the way cities are. Inside room 412, a boy scraped pudding, and a man stood near a window, and a woman sat on the edge of a bed and held her brother's hand, and none of them said anything for a while, which was the best possible thing to say. The night did not end cleanly. That was the thing about real life, that stories sometimes forgot the moment of resolution was never actually the end. The moment Rocco's text came through was the end of one phase and the immediate beginning of another, and the other was made of paperwork and phone calls and lawyers and a board meeting that Warren Aldis called for 8 a.m. Saturday morning, which was 7 hours away, which meant Emily was not going to sleep. She stayed at St. Catherine's until midnight. Noah fell asleep at 11:15 with Gerald tucked under his arm and the pudding cup still on the bedside table, because he had requested it stay there for sentimental reasons, and Elise had allowed it because Elise understood that some victories deserved to be visible. Emily sat beside him for 45 minutes after he fell asleep, not because he needed her there, but because she needed to be there. Because she had spent 2 years funneling every decision she made through the filter of what kept Noah safe. And now that filter had changed, and she needed a moment to just sit next to him and breathe in the fact that he was here and okay and free of the thing that had been hanging over both of them without him fully knowing it. Dante waited in the corridor. He did not come in. He did not check his phone visibly. He simply waited the way he had learned to wait, with patience that had nothing performative about it, nothing that asked to be noticed or thanked. When she came out at midnight, he was standing where she had left him, jacket still on, looking at nothing specific, entirely present. She said, "You didn't have to stay." He said, "I know." She looked at him for a moment. "Rocco needs you back at the tower." Rocco is 53 years old and has managed considerably more complicated situations than one detained cardiac surgeon, Dante said. "He's fine." She almost smiled. Almost. She was too tired and too hollowed out for a full smile, but the thing that moved across her face was in the family of one. "I have the board meeting at 8. The FBI wants a statement by noon. The Foundation's legal team called while I was inside. They need a preliminary debrief before the morning meeting." She paused. "And at some point, I need to go home and change out of this dress." "The blue one," Dante said. "The blue one." She looked down at it. "I'm going to burn it." "That seems appropriate." She looked up at him. The corridor was quiet, the particular nighttime quiet of a children's hospital, lower and more careful than daytime, everyone moving at a different register, aware of small bodies sleeping on the other side of every door. "Can I ask you something?" "Yes." "The resignation letter, on your desk." She watched his expression. "You prepared it before tonight, before any of this. How long had it been there?" He was quiet for a moment. Not because he was deciding whether to answer, she understood, because he was deciding how precisely to answer, which was different. 3 weeks, he said. "I prepared it 3 weeks ago. After the incident in the parking structure on a Tuesday, you were moving differently, favoring your left side, and you said you'd tweaked something at the gym. I knew it wasn't the gym." He paused. "I prepared the letter because I realized you might need to leave the job too, if leaving meant getting out. I didn't want the employment situation to be one more thing holding you in place." She absorbed that. 3 weeks. He had been carrying the letter, the decision, the deliberate construction of an exit she hadn't known she had for 3 weeks, while she was sitting 2 offices away, navigating her days with the practiced steadiness of someone who had learned to make themselves difficult to read. "You never said anything," she said. It wasn't my place to say anything. It was my place to make sure you had options. He paused. There's a difference between those two things. I know, she said quietly. I know the difference. She had always known the difference. She had lived inside the opposite of it for 2 years, a man who inserted himself into every decision, every space, every option, and called it love. Who made himself indispensable through control rather than through care. The contrast was not subtle. It had never been subtle. She had simply been too deep inside it to hold both things in view simultaneously. She was not deep inside it anymore. The letter, she said. Is it still on your desk? Yes. I'm not going to use it. He looked at her. Something in his expression did not change exactly, but it settled the way the last piece of something settles into place. All right, he said. I'm not saying that because I feel like I owe you something, she said. I want to be very clear about that. I know you're not. I'm saying it because the job was never the problem, and you were never the problem, and the building was never the problem. I like the work. I'm good at it. And She stopped, reorganized. I don't want to leave because of him. I've spent 2 years making decisions based on what he required. I'm done making decisions based on him. That's a good reason, Dante said. It's a practical reason. Those are the best kind. She held his gaze for a moment. There are other reasons, she said more quietly, that I'm not going to say right now because it's midnight, and I've had the single most destabilizing evening of my life, and I think some things should be said at a better time. I agree completely, Dante said with an equanimity that she could feel was genuine and not performed. But they exist, she said, the other reasons. I know they exist, he said. I've known for a while. She looked at him. How long is a while? Since the 3rd month. When you reorganized the entire Hargrove filing system on a Thursday afternoon without being asked and left a color-coded index on my desk with a note that said, "This was bothering me," and no further explanation. He paused. I thought about it for the rest of that week. She had forgotten about that. She remembered doing it. The filing system had been genuinely chaotic, and it had been bothering her for 2 months, and she had finally just fixed it. She had not considered what it looked like from the outside. She had not considered that someone might read it as anything other than professional irritation. It was bothering me, she said. I know, he said. That was the part that got me. She laughed. It came out of her without warning, real, unguarded, the kind of laugh that happens when you are too tired to maintain the careful architecture of emotional management and something genuinely good catches you off guard. It lasted about 4 seconds, and then she caught it and steadied, but the warmth of it stayed. Dante was smiling, actually smiling, not the controlled expression he wore in rooms full of people, but the thing underneath it, smaller, more specific, directed entirely at her. She looked away first, but only because she needed to. I should go, she said. The debrief in the morning. I'll have a car take you home. You don't need to, Emily. She stopped. Let someone do a small thing, he said. You just did an enormous one. She was quiet for a moment. Then, okay. The car came. She got in. She looked up at him through the window and he looked back at her, and she thought with great clarity and without anxiety that this was not the end of something. This was the very early beginning of something, and it was going to unfold at a pace that she chose in a direction she chose, because choosing was the thing she was learning to do again. She had forgotten somewhere in the last 2 years that she was allowed to choose. She was remembering fast. The car pulled away from St. Catherine's, and she leaned her head back against the seat and let herself be taken home. The Saturday morning board meeting lasted 4 hours. Emily arrived in clean clothes with coffee and a full night's worth of preparation, condensed into 4 hours of sleep and 2 hours of documentation review, and she sat across from Warren Aldis and 6 other board members and 3 of the foundation's lawyers and 2 FBI agents who were observing rather than leading, and she told the entire story from the beginning. Precisely, methodically, without unnecessary emotion and without unnecessary restraint. 4 months of documentation. 14 months of conditional hold. 26 patients across 3 years. The fabricated footage and its 6 a.m. creation timestamp. The transfer order at 9:47 p.m. The code word. All of it. Warren Aldous did not look away from her once. When she finished, he sat quietly for a moment, and then he said, "I owe you an apology." She looked at him. "You didn't know." "No," he said. "But I should have asked harder questions. The donation correlation was visible in the annual reports if you looked for it. I didn't look for it because it was easier not to." He paused. "That's not an excuse. It's a confession." He looked at the table and then back at her. "The foundation will do better. You have my word." She believed him, not because she was naive, but because she had learned specifically and painfully the difference between a man performing accountability and a man actually feeling it, and Warren Aldous had the face of the second kind. At 11:30, her phone buzzed with a text from a number she now recognized as Rocco's. It said Blake's lawyer arrived at 9, federal review ongoing. Celeste Vane gave a full statement this morning. Voluntary. Her lawyer negotiated cooperation in exchange for consideration. She gave them everything, including communications going back 4 years. Emily read it twice. Then she typed back, "Noah's care transfer to Dr. Reed, is it confirmed?" The reply came in 40 seconds. "Confirmed as of 7 this morning. Dr. Reed took formal custody of his file. His next appointment is Tuesday. Clean slate." She set the phone face down on the table and finished the meeting. At 1:15, she was standing outside St. Catherine's again because she had promised Noah she would come back in the afternoon, and she kept her promises, particularly the ones she made to him. She brought him a bag from the diner 2 blocks from their apartment, the one that made the specific pancakes he liked, the ones with the blueberries cooked in rather than on top, which he had once described as architecturally superior to the alternative. He was sitting up in bed with Gerald and a book when she came in, and he looked at the bag and then at her with the evaluating expression and said, "What kind?" "Blueberry," she said. "Architecturally superior." He took the bag. "Sit down." She sat. He ate 3 bites before he said, without looking up from his food, "Dr. Reed came this morning." "I know. What did you think?" "What did you—" "She asked me questions about how I feel, not just about the numbers." He ate another bite. "Dr. Blake never asked me how I feel. He asked about symptoms." He paused. "Those are different things." "They are," Emily agreed. "She said we'll do a full assessment Tuesday, and then we talk about the surgery timeline." He set the pancakes down. "She said maybe September for recovery completion, which means September for school." Emily looked at him. "Real school." "Real school," he confirmed. "Lunchroom, gym class, all of it." He picked up Gerald and looked at the wolf. "Gerald is going to need to stay home during school hours, but he's agreed to it." "Very mature of him." "I told him it was non-negotiable." Noah set Gerald down. Yeah. "Are you okay?" He said it the way he said things that mattered directly, without softening, looking at her face with the full weight of his assessment. "Not are you managing okay? Are you actually okay?" She held his gaze. 10 years old, 6 years of hospitals, and 2 years of something nobody should put a child anywhere near the edge of, even inadvertently, even while trying to protect them from it. "I'm getting there," she said. "That's honest," he said. "I prefer honest." "I know you do." He was quiet for a moment. Then, "Is the rain car man going to keep being around?" She chose her words carefully. "I don't know exactly what that looks like yet, but yes, in some form." Noah appeared to process this with the serious consideration it deserved. "He waited in the corridor for like 2 hours last night," he said. "Elise told me. She said he just stood there. He didn't pace, he didn't bother anyone, he just waited." "That sounds like him," Emily said. "Gerald upgraded him to excellent this morning," Noah said. "I wanted you to know." She looked at her brother. The love she felt in that moment was too large for the room, too large for her chest, almost too large to hold, without it becoming something she couldn't manage, and she held it anyway. "Tell Gerald I'll pass it along," she said. Monday morning, Emily walked into Valenti Tower at 8:52 a.m. She had the weekend behind her. The board meeting, the FBI statement, 2 visits to Noah, 1 very long phone call with her mother, who had cried for 20 minutes and then become practical in the way mothers sometimes did after they had cried enough asking questions about lawyers and timelines and what Emily needed. She had actually slept for the first time in longer than she could accurately measure the deep, unconscious sleep of someone whose nervous system had finally been given permission to stand down. She had the weekend behind her, and she had the morning in front of her, and she had a very specific idea. She did not go to her desk first. She went to the 42nd floor to the corridor she knew the exact step count of, and she stopped outside Dante's office door, and she knocked. His voice from inside, "Come in." She did not go in. "Actually," she said through the door, "I need you to come out." A pause, short, the pause of someone understanding something quickly. The door opened. He was in a shirt and no jacket yet, early enough in the morning that the day was still assembling itself. And he looked at her in the corridor with the question in his expression that was not quite a question, because he already understood the answer. She held up 2 coffees, the ones from the place 3 blocks away that she had been going to on her lunch breaks for 6 months, and had never mentioned to him because it had been one of the small things that was hers alone, one of the small territories of self she had maintained through everything. "The corridor is neutral ground," she said. "You're not behind your desk and I'm not at mine. Nobody is in charge of the other person's time." He looked at the coffees, then at her. "Neutral ground," he repeated. "I read somewhere that you should start things in places where both people can leave equally easily," she said. "I thought that was a good principle." "It's an excellent principle," he said. He stepped into the corridor. She handed him one of the coffees, and they stood in the hallway of Valenti Tower on a Monday morning, 12 steps from his door, and the distance between them was exactly the distance they had each chosen, and it was the right distance. "I'm not going to say thank you," she said, "because what you did isn't the kind of thing that fits in a thank you, and I don't want to put it in a box that's too small for it." "Then don't," he said. "What I will say is that I understand the difference now." She looked at him. "Between someone who opens doors to trap you inside and someone who waits outside them. I understand it in a way I couldn't have understood it a year ago." She paused. "And I want you to know that I walked through this door today. I knocked, and I asked you to come out, and I walked to this spot in this corridor. I did that." "I know you did," he said. "I need you to know that it matters that I did," she said. "Not that you waited, that I chose to walk." "It matters more than anything else," he said. "The waiting was easy. The walking was yours." She held his gaze for a moment. Outside the building, the city was doing its Monday morning business, loud and indifferent and enormous, full of people navigating their own complicated arrangements with the world. Inside, in a corridor on the 42nd floor, 2 people stood with coffee and the particular morning quiet of a beginning that had been earned rather than simply fallen into. She raised her cup slightly. He raised his. They drank their coffee in the hallway. Neither of them said anything else for a while, which was not silence in the uncomfortable sense, but silence in the sense of 2 people who had learned to be precise with words, choosing for this one moment to simply be present without requiring anything of it. 3 days later, Noah sent Emily a photo. It arrived at 7:48 p.m., right when she was reviewing the Foundation's revised patient oversight proposal, and she opened it without looking at the caption first. It was a picture of a pudding cup, chocolate half-eaten with Gerald the stuffed wolf propped against it. The caption said, "Evidence of victory." "Tell the rain car man Gerald says excellent stands." She laughed. She laughed fully, and without catching it, the kind of laugh that fills a room and doesn't apologize for itself. She texted back, "I'll tell him." She put the phone down and looked at the proposal on her desk and thought about September and a lunchroom and gym class, and a dog that was still technically a maybe, and a corridor on the 42nd floor where 2 people drank coffee on a Monday morning in a space where both of them could leave equally easily, and neither of them had. She thought about the blue dress which was in a garbage bag at the bottom of her building's trash chute, and what it had meant, and what it no longer meant, and the difference between being told what to wear and choosing what to wear, and how large that difference was, how enormous, how fundamental, how easy it was to lose, and how much it cost to get back. She thought about Noah saying, "I'm not a child," with the patience of someone who had been waiting to say it. She thought about Elise Morgan arriving in room 412 with the authority of a woman who had been a night shift pediatric nurse long enough to know exactly what needed protecting and exactly how to protect it. She thought about Warren Aldis standing at his table and saying, "I should have asked harder questions," and the difference between that and every other man in every other position who had looked at the same information and chosen comfort over conscience. She thought about Rocco Hayes in a corridor saying, "Tonight is the last time you have to," and meaning it. And she thought about a door. Not any specific door. Not the one on the 42nd floor. Not the one on room 412. Not the one she had walked through on a Friday evening 11 months ago, into a job that had turned out to be the first safe ground she had stood on in 2 years without knowing it. Just the idea of a door. The difference between one that closes around you and one that stays open. The difference between a cage that looks like a life and a life that actually is one. Emily Carter had spent 2 years being managed, contained, threatened through love and controlled through fear. She had spent 4 months building the evidence that would end it alone carefully, with the precision of someone who understood that the only exit she trusted was one she constructed herself. She had stood on a stage in front of 260 people and said the truest thing she had ever said out loud, and she had walked off that stage toward her brother, and she had sat on the edge of a hospital bed and held him, while the thing that had been used to hold her collapsed under the weight of its own exposure. She had done all of that, and on a Monday morning she had knocked on a door and asked the person inside to come out instead, because she had learned at a cost she would not wish on anyone that the direction of entry matters, that who holds the door matters, that a love that requires your smallness is not love at all, but a very convincing imitation of it designed by someone who needs you diminished. Real love, she had learned, does not need you small. Real love hands you the door and waits while you decide. She had decided. And for the first time in 2 years, every door in front of her was one she had chosen to open herself.